Before we go, make sure you support the channel by subscribe. All of this started, more or less, 4 hours ago. That isn't the whole truth, but we aren't there yet. This 4 hours ago, the sun beat down on my head as I cut through the thick air. I was technically there on business, but really I just took the trip as an excuse to tour the city. I would pass the doors of a restaurant and be hit with smells I haven't smelt since I still lived with my mom. The whole city was loud and vibrant. It was at a crosswalk when I saw that infernal poster. See the universe. It read. It's just white text on a background of stars. There was an address in the corner that wasn't too far from the crosswalk I waited at. I'd heard about the light-hearted voodoo shows and psychics in the city, but I guess they were making a move from the paranormal to the extraterrestrial. I hadn't anything else to do, so I just walked over to the address on the poster. The building was low and run down. Its roofing was partly blown off, and the plaster on the outside was littered with cracks that stretched from the pavement to the roof. It sat right across the street from a church with a grand arched roof and towering white spires. I was tempted to blow off the dirty little building and instead tour the inside of the cathedral. I wish I had, but really there was nothing that could be done. Walking into the building, I was hit with cool, dry air. The air conditioning and dehumidifier worked together in a beautiful cooperation that strove to drive out the outside's presence within. The room I stood in was small and sparsely decorated. There was a line of chairs on the left-hand wall and a reception desk to the right. Again, I started to reconsider when I noticed the reception desk was empty. As I began to turn around, a small man scurried into the room as if summoned by my presence. He was short and skinny with dry, pale skin. Every part of his face was decorated with wrinkles, denoting his old age. His hair was white and thin, and his teeth were considerably yellowed. When he spoke, his voice was raspy and high-pitched without any trace of the accent of his residence. "Hello. Are you here for the guided tour of the universe?" Slightly off-put by his upfront attitude and unbefitting voice, I hesitated before responding with a short confirmation. "Okay. It's $10 for the standard tour, $20 for the hands-on tour." "I think I'll go for the hands-on tour," I said as I dug a $10 bill and two $5 bills from my wallet. He smiled as I handed him the fare. "Follow me," he said as he walked ahead of me. Before us were two doors. He walked to the one on the right and flung it open, beckoning me inside. The room was similarly cold, but dissimilarly cluttered and disorganized. Wires hung from the ceiling, bottles and plastic packaging littered the crowded counters, and the sinks were overflowing with dishes. In the center of the room was a large leather sofa. The man wordlessly motioned for me to sit there. "How familiar are you with our dimensions?" he questioned. "Our dimensions?" "Yes. That's like a square as opposed to a cube. Two-dimensional versus three-dimensional." "Yeah, I know. I was beginning to regret dishing out $20 for this." He sat at a desk in the corner of the room as a screen lowered in front of me. A projector whirred to life overhead, and a line was displayed on the screen. He spoke again. "A line is a one-dimensional shape. It can go to the right or to the left, but nowhere else." The image switched to a circle. A circle is two-dimensional. It can move up, down, left, and right. The second axis adds a lot more depth of movement. Now, do you know what a two-dimensional square would look like if it passed through a one-dimensional plane? "I guess I don't know." "Observe." The man narrated as the circle moved across the screen. A line was drawn to the left of the circle, and it moved back and forth across the line. The man explained that the line was the one-dimensional plane, and the circle was the two-dimensional object. But what would this look like within the plane? In the middle of the screen was a dot. That extended in both directions as a line, then receded back to being a dot. Now let's do something similar in the third dimension. In the third dimension, we get yet another axis that again runs perpendicular to all directions in the dimension before it. Let's watch a sphere pass through this two-dimensional plane. A similar setup showed a flat square plane with a sphere moving across it. Once again, a view of the sphere within the plane was shown. A dot in the center of the screen spread out to be a circle, then once again shrunk. "This is where we hit a roadblock," he went on. I was listening, but only halfway. Although I found the talk interesting, I felt like a sucker for paying $20 for it. He continued speaking. "We live in a third-dimensional plane and therefore cannot imagine what the fourth may look like. It is quite impossible to picture a direction perpendicular to all directions we know." He spoke with what sounded like a sincere sadness before picking up his tone with the next line. "That is, we couldn't until today." The screen lifted and the man crossed the room to a large machine. He pushed over some empty drink cups that rested on the seat. "Watch now as a fourth-dimensional object passes through our fourth-dimensional plane." I just sat and watched. I couldn't really think of anything to say, and I had no clue what kind of parlor show trick he was going to pull. A loud, whirring sound erupted from the machine he sat in as he shouted, "Watch the center of the room." To me. In the center of the room, a small black sphere appeared out of what felt like nowhere. It was glossy and couldn't have been larger than a marble. Slowly, it swelled to the size of a bowling ball, then a beach ball, then shrunk back down before disappearing. Honestly, it scared the shit out of me. "How'd you do that?" I asked. The man got up from his chair and walked back to the desk as the screen lowered again. Consider a bouncing ball. An animation of a two-dimensional ball appeared on the screen. Though the ball contains several states of movement, its movement can be tracked as one fluid movement, not only through the second dimension, but also a flowing shape in the third dimension. He dug through the clutter beneath his desk and produced a small model. He walked over and handed it to me. The model resembled a solid aluminum cylinder that moved up and down like a cosine wave. It was attached to a wooden base. I turned it over and observed it to try and find something weird about it, but found nothing. I handed it back to the man. Once in his hands, he carried it over to a weird conveyor belt that had a roofed section along its length. "This machine," he explained, "will show a real-time cross-section of the object as it passes through. Watch the screen." As the object passed, I saw a similar animation of a bouncing ball. I was paying more attention before, but I wasn't exactly drooling over this display. I watched as he passed a ball, a cube and a cylinder through as well, noting the way the shapes shifted as they passed through the plane. Human life can similarly be summed up as a single fluid movement from birth unto death. This life can also be mapped out in the fourth dimension and is cut in a three-dimensional cross-section that we call our home. Now, this is just a lot of babbling, and I know that you're probably thinking about how boring of a lecture this is. I just need you to have some kind of understanding of what I'm talking about before I let you look at yourself in the fourth dimension. Excuse me. It's a little much to comprehend when you look without having some kind of understanding of what any of it means. You can never really understand what it means until you look yourself. I need you to understand, however, that you cannot undo this action. There is no unseeing what you are going to see. Are you sure you want to do this? When he started with this, I knew he was just fucking with me. Some dude in New Orleans just happens to figure out how the fourth dimension looks, and you only have to fork over $20 to see it yourself. He was just going to show me some odd-looking shape and claim it to be the fourth dimension, like some magician with UV face paint conjuring evil spirit. What the hell? Might as well get my money's worth. He smiled and left the room. About a minute later, he wheeled in a cart with some odd apparatuses on it. He slid some weird brass clamps over my head and attached them to the computer at his desk. He told me to stay calm and began counting down. I didn't hear him get to one. Have you ever thought about describing sight to the blind? I promise this applies to the story. How about imagining a new color? It's impossible. I genuinely have 0 words to describe what I saw about 3 hours ago. His poster wasn't really lying. I saw everything. Life itself was laid bare in front of me. I saw myself in one great arc that cut across the everythingness of it all. I followed the arc back into myself at college parties, asking out some girl to high school prom, my middle school dance, elementary school Christmas parties. I saw everything I ever was in one great, awful direction. Further along the shape that is me, I saw myself leaving the parlor, going to my hotel, getting married, starting a family, dying of cancer. It was all there. One perfectly fluid motion. I tracked the arcs of the people around me. I looked at their life story, all contained in one bit line that ran across a cosmic canvas. I was only in there for about 10 minutes before getting yanked out. It was awful to lose the godly direction. Everything looked and felt so flat once I was back in my home dimension. I don't think I've verbally said anything since going in. I guess I just haven't felt the need to. Maybe if I spoke, the verbal dam would break, and I'd rattle this off like a madman to some poor Louisianan woman on the bus to my hotel. I just silently stood up, looked at the man with a look of understanding, and left. I took the bus to the hotel like I saw myself doing. I laid in the bed motionless for an hour like I saw myself doing. I booted up the computer like I saw myself doing. I wrote this all out in some Google Doc like I saw myself doing. Now I will post this like I saw myself do, and then I will live my life with no surprises.